Let's see how quickly we can cover everything you need to know for GCSE Biology Paper 2 for CCEA. This is good for higher and foundation tier, double combined and triple separate science. I'll tell you when some of the bigger concepts are for triple, but not what's for higher and foundation, as there's not a lot of difference honestly. And don't forget to check out the Science Shorts app to help you test your knowledge. Let's go. Plants also have organs. Leaves are where photosynthesis takes place, producing food for the plant. Water also leaves the plant through them, allowing transpiration to take place, the diffusion of water into roots and up the xylem. We say it's unidirectional as it only goes in one direction. The rate of transpiration can be increased by the following: increasing the temperature, decreasing the humidity, and increasing the air movement around the plant. All of these result in water evaporating from the leaves at a faster rate. Roots are where water and mineral ions enter the plant. The meristem are where new cells are made. Phloem, on the other hand, are the conveyor belts of cells that transport sugars, food, and sap up and down the plant. We call this translocation. That's bidirectional. A lack of nitrate ions means a plant can't synthesize proteins effectively, and that stunts growth. Chlorosis is the scientific term for the yellowing of leaves. This can be due to magnesium deficiency, as is needed to make chlorophyll. The heart is at the center of the circulatory system, the transport system of your body. We call it a double circulatory system because blood enters the heart twice every time it's pumped around the body. Deoxygenated blood from the body enters in the right side of your heart. By the way, you always look at the heart or any diagram as if it's yours, and it enters through the vena cava, the main vein, into the right atrium of the heart. The valve between the right atrium and the right ventricle stops backflow, just like all valves, to stop deoxygenated blood from going back into the body. The heart muscles contract and the blood goes through the pulmonary artery to the lungs to be oxygenated. It then comes back to the heart through the pulmonary vein into the left atrium. It then goes into the left ventricle, then out to the body through the aorta. The left side of the heart has thicker walls, as the left ventricle has to pump blood to the whole body, whereas the right ventricle only has to pump it to the lungs. A group of cells in the wall of the right atrium create electrical pulses that cause the heart muscles to contract and the heart to beat. If these aren't working properly, you can be given an artificial pacemaker to do the same job. Blood vessels that go away from the heart are always arteries, veins towards. That means that arteries carry oxygenated blood apart from the pulmonary artery and vice versa for veins. Arteries have thicker walls to withstand the higher pressure, and so that means they have a thinner lumen, the hole in the middle that the blood travels through. Veins have thinner walls due to the lower blood pressure, but have valves to stop backflow. Arteries split and get smaller and smaller until they end up as tiny capillaries with one cell thick walls to allow the fast diffusion of molecules in and out of cells. The heart is a muscle, so it needs its own supply of oxygen and, therefore, blood to keep the muscle pumping. This is delivered by the coronary artery. If this is blocked by the buildup of fatty deposits, a heart attack can occur. This is CHD, coronary heart disease. Stents are little tubes inserted into blood vessels to keep them open, so blood can flow in this case. Statins are drugs that reduce cholesterol, which in turn reduces the fatty deposits. Faulty heart valves result in backflow occurring. These can be replaced with artificial ones. Along with plasma and red blood cells, blood also carries white blood cells which combat infection and platelets which clump together to clot wounds and stop bleeding. Menstruation occurs in females after puberty. First, FSH, made by the pituitary gland, causes an egg to mature in the ovary. This also causes the ovaries to produce estrogen, which causes the uterus lining to thicken. It also inhibits or stops the production of FSH, so no more eggs mature in that cycle. Very clever. Estrogen also causes the pituitary gland to produce LH, luteinizing hormone, which causes the egg to be released, and it starts to travel towards the uterus via the oviduct over several days. Finally, progesterone is also produced by the ovaries, which maintains the uterus lining. This is great news if you're looking to get pregnant. If not, you need to find some way of stopping a sperm cell from meeting an egg cell. Contraception options include pills that inhibit FSH production, so no eggs mature, progesterone injections that stop any eggs from being released, or you can just have an implant that slowly releases this over months or years if needed. Condoms for men and diaphragms for women are simple barriers to stop sperm from reaching an egg. An IUD, an intrauterine device like a copper coil, prevents a fertilized egg from implanting in the lining. You could quite simply just avoid sex for some time after the egg has been released, as that's when it travels slowly down the oviduct where a sperm can meet it. Clamping the oviducts, sometimes referred to as having your tubes tied, or cutting the sperm duct, Either of these will obviously stop the cells from meeting. Some couples, however, would love to have children but can't due to infertility. Sometimes it's something fairly simple, like not enough FSH or LH produced, which injections can fix. The most expensive solution to bigger issues is IVF, in vitro fertilization. Eggs are harvested from the woman after inducing their release and will then be fertilized in the lab with the prospective father's sperm. Any embryos that develop are inserted back into the uterus, where they will hopefully embed in the lining and grow normally. The success rate, sadly, is very low, but there's also the risk that there could be more than one baby born, which might not be desirable. If an egg is successfully fertilized, it will embed itself in the uterus lining, where it will divide to form a zygote and then an embryo. The umbilical cord develops between it and the uterus lining, which has a good blood supply to provide oxygen, nutrients, and everything else the baby needs to grow. Even in the womb, the higher levels of testosterone in a male or estrogen in a female determines the baby's physiology. Eukaryotic cell nuclei contain DNA, which is stored in several chromosomes. Humans have 23 pairs of these in every nucleus, so we call them diploid cells. That's not the case for gametes though, sperm and egg cells. They have just 23, not 23 pairs. They have half the amount, so therefore we call them haploid cells. New cells must constantly be made for growth and repair. They do this by duplicating by mitosis. Here's the process, the mitosis process. The genetic material is duplicated. The nucleus breaks down and one set of each chromosome pair is pulled to opposite sides of the cell. A new nucleus forms in each of these to house the copied chromosomes. We now have two identical cells. By the way, you might hear that the nucleus divides, which isn't quite right, but you'll get the mark if you put that. Genome is the term given to all the genetic material in an organism. This code is stored in DNA, of course, which is a two-stranded polymer in a double helix shape. A gene is a section of DNA that codes for a specific protein. The Human Genome Project completed its initial goal in 2003 when scientists mapped out what every gene is responsible for coding. This is powerful because it can help us identify what genes cause diseases or inherited disorders. Genotype is the term given to what specific code is stored in an organism, while phenotype is how that code is expressed in your characteristics, what proteins are made, and that affects your physiology. The monomers between two strands of DNA are called nucleotides, and they're made from a sugar and phosphate group. There are 4 types: A, T, C, and G. You don't need to know what the names are, but A and T always go together in the sequence, as do C and G. Every 3 of these bases, as we call them, are a code for an amino acid. The sequence is copied by mRNA. This copy is then taken out of the nucleus to a ribosome in the cell, where amino acids are connected in the order needed, which makes a protein, the shape of which affects its function. They also need to be folded into the right shape as well. Harmful mutations can change a gene so much that it results in a protein being synthesized that doesn't do the job it's supposed to. We now know that some DNA, however, doesn't directly code for proteins, but influences how other genes are expressed. This is the realm of epigenetics, and is completely changing the way that we view DNA. Some characteristics are controlled by just one gene, like color blindness. These different types of the same gene are called alleles. Usually, characteristics are dependent on 2 or more genes and how they interact. But keeping things simple, dominant alleles are those that result in a characteristic being expressed, even if there's another allele present, a recessive allele we say. If you have the alleles big B, little b for eye color, big B being brown, little b being blue, you will have brown eyes. It's only when there's no dominant allele in this case that the recessive allele is expressed. So me having blue eyes, I must have the gene little b, little b. Big B, or little b are homozygous genes, as they only have one type of allele, whereas big B, little b is what we call heterozygous. We can use a Punnett square to predict the probability of a certain phenotype. My parents have brown eyes, but they both have heterozygous alleles for eye color. There are 3 different outcomes of these combining, with a 25% chance of making me. That's little b, so I'm not so much 1 in a million, more 1 in 4. Eye color is by the by, but some alleles can result in disorders being inherited. For example, polydactyly, extra fingers or toes, is caused by a dominant allele, while cystic fibrosis is caused by a recessive allele. Even if 2 parents don't have cystic fibrosis, they could still be carrying the recessive allele, so their child could have the disorder. Human DNA contains 23 pairs of chromosomes, but only one pair of these determines sex. If you have XX chromosomes, you're female. If you have XY chromosomes, you're male. The expression of these genes affects every cell in your body, every aspect of your physiology. We can also make a Punnett square to show this. As you can see, there's a 50-50 chance of a child being male or female. Variation is a result of the genes inherited from an organism's parents and also environmental factors. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution claims that random variation in offspring will result in some being better suited to their environment than others, and so are more likely to survive and reproduce. Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, however, asserted that adaptation and variation is guided by DNA in response to a changing environment. This was scoffed at for a long time, but we now know there's some truth to this, thanks to the discoveries made in epigenetics like we mentioned. Bacterial resistance to antibiotics is largely considered to be evidence of Darwinian evolution. Bacteria divide, mutations occur, and inevitably a bacterium with an increased resistance will be produced. That's why we only want to use antibiotics when absolutely necessary. It also means you have to complete the whole course of antibiotics. If you don't, weaker bacteria will be killed off, but more resistant ones will still be there, and then they're able to reproduce and make you even more ill. If organisms are able to produce fertile offspring, we say they're of the same species. Tigers and lions have been known to make liger offspring, but as they're infertile, we don't consider tigers and lions to be of the same species. We can selectively breed living things with desired characteristics to enhance these. For example, breeding dogs to produce breeds like Labradors, Collies, and if you're into undesirable characteristics, pugs too. In order to reproduce sexually, gametes, that's sex cells, must be made. This happens by meiosis, for example, in the testes to make sperm. Chromosomes in a diploid cell, that is 23 pairs for humans, are copied. Similar chromosomes then pair up, and genes are swapped between them. The cell then divides to make 2 diploid cells, which then divide again, along with the chromosomes themselves, to make 4 haploid cells, ready to fuse with another gamete. This is one way that variation occurs in offspring, by the way. The resulting diploid cell then starts to divide via mitosis. Advancements in biology mean that we can also genetically modify organisms if we don't want to wait for selective breeding to do the job, or when we can't actually achieve what we want to with it for good or ill. For example, scientists have genetically modified bacteria to produce insulin, which can be harvested and used to treat people with diabetes. Genetically modifying crops is the way of boosting their yields or nutritional value. For example, golden rice has a gene inserted into it that produces vitamin A. It was developed to combat diets in certain areas that were lacking in this vitamin. Other GM crops have been modified to be more resistant to diseases, for example. The process of genetic engineering goes as follows. A gene is chemically cut from the organism that has the desired characteristic. This is done using enzymes, for example, the gene from a jellyfish that causes it to glow in the dark. This is then inserted into a vector, like a bacterial plasmid or virus that, in turn, inserts the gene into another organism, say a bunny rabbit. But this must be done in the very early stages of its development, say just after the egg has been fertilized, as this is the only way that you can be sure that the gene will be present in every cell of the bunny as it grows. By the way, I didn't make up this example, this has actually been done. CVD, cardiovascular disease, is an example of a non-communicable disease, as the cause comes from inside your body. Other examples of such diseases include conditions like allergic reactions and cancer. A communicable disease must be caused by a pathogen that enters your body that will cause a viral, bacterial, or fungal infection. Back to non-communicable diseases though, obesity and too much sugar can cause type 2 diabetes. A bad diet, smoking, and lack of exercise can affect the risk of heart disease. Alcohol can cause liver diseases, smoking, lung disease, or lung cancer. Cancer is the result of damaged cells dividing uncontrollably, leading to tumours. A carcinogen is the term given to anything that increases the risk of cancer, for example the tar in cigarettes. Benign tumours don't spread through the body and they're relatively easy to treat. However, malignant tumours are when these cancerous cells spread through the body, much worse. BMI stands for Body Mass Index. It's an indication of how healthy a person's weight is relative to their height. Whatever number you end up with will put you into bands that determine if you're underweight, a healthy weight, overweight, or obese. Communicable diseases are caused by pathogens. That can be viruses, bacteria, fungi, or protists. Protists are single-cell parasites. They all reproduce in your body and cause damage to it. But viruses can't reproduce by themselves. A virus, in fact, is just a protein casing that surrounds genetic code that it injects into your cells, which causes the cell to produce more copies of the virus. The cell explodes and the virus goes on to infect more cells. Creepy, right? Measles is a virus that causes a rash, and it can actually be pretty deadly too. It's spread by droplets from sneezes or coughs. HIV is an STD, or STI, sexually transmitted disease or infection, that compromises your immune system. That's called AIDS for short. It can also be spread by people sharing needles. Bacteria, on the other hand, release toxins that damage your body's cells, like salmonella in undercooked food or gonorrhea, another STD that causes a yellow discharge from the genitalia. Not nice. Fungi do something similar, like athlete's foot, while protists do all sorts of different things. For example, malaria is caused by a protist that burrows into red blood cells to multiply, then they burst out, destroying the red blood cell in the process. It's spread by mosquitoes, so we say mosquitoes are the vector for this disease. It's not only animals though, plants are particularly susceptible to fungal infections like rose black spot. Purple black spots appear on the leaves and then they fall off. Such infections can be treated with fungicides. Tobacco mosaic virus affects plants by discoloring leaves due to inhibiting chlorophyll production. Less photosynthesis occurs, and that causes stunted growth. All life consists of cells. We can see cells with a normal light microscope and maybe the nucleus, but the subcellular structures won't really be visible. Using an electron microscope, however, allows us to see far finer details, so we can see an image of these organelles. As such, these microscopes have a better resolving power and a higher resolution. We say we can calculate the actual size of a cell by knowing the magnification of the microscope. Magnification is equal to image size divided by object size. So I hope you found that helpful. Leave a like and a comment if you did, and click on the card to take you to the playlist for all of the papers, and don't forget to check out the Quiz Shorts app to help you test your knowledge, and I'll see you next time.